Heroes and villains. The big question. In what different ways did individuals prove to be heroes of the American Revolution? Every war has its heroes and villains. The Revolutionary War was no exception. As the war progressed, a sense of patriotism grew. Many colonists were determined to stand up and fight for their country. One of the greatest heroes on the colonists' side was George Washington. Washington was commander-in-chief of the Continental Army throughout the war. He took over not long after the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775, fighting the British in New York and New Jersey. He survived the dreadful winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge. He was still in command when the Continental Army won the decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781. Edward Percy Moran, Washington's farewell to his officers. Helping hands. There were also many heroes from other countries who came to support the colonists and help them gain independence from Britain. Kosciuszko from Poland helped the Continental Army win the Battle of Saratoga. Von Steuben, the German, helped Washington transform untrained farmers into a disciplined, well-regulated army. The Marquis de Lafayette was the young Frenchman who was a major in the Continental Army and helped Washington win the Battle of Yorktown. Another hero was the Scottish sea captain John Paul Jones. Jones went to live in the colonies, and when war broke out, he decided to fight on the side of his adopted homeland. In 1779, his ship, Bonhomme Richard, became involved in a sea battle with the British ship Serapis. The Bonhomme Richard had 42 guns. The Serapis had 50 guns. For a while, the two ships floated right next to each other, blasting away. At one point, a British sailor shouted to Jones, asking him if he was ready to surrender. "Surrender!" Jones shouted back. "I have not yet begun to fight." In the end, it was the British captain who had to surrender. The story of the victory, along with Jones's defiant reply, was printed in newspapers, and John Paul Jones became a hero. Nathan Hale, a school teacher from Connecticut, demonstrated his heroism in a different way. In 1776, he volunteered to help General Washington with a very dangerous mission. He agreed to sneak behind British lines in New York City and spy on the British Army there. Unfortunately, Hale was captured, and the British gave orders that he be hanged. However, before he died, according to legend, Hale uttered, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." "Surrender?" Jones shouted back. "I have not yet begun to fight." Unsung Heroes. Saul Matthews, an African enlisted in the Continental Army, served as a soldier in Virginia. His name may be less recognizable today than some of the others, but he became a hero in his own right. Matthews was a successful spy and provided key information about British troop positions. Colonel Josiah Parker commissioned Matthews to go on spying missions in British military camps. Another unsung colonial hero, James Lafayette Armistead, was asked to become a servant to Lord Cornwallis to spy on him. At some point, Lord Cornwallis asked Armistead to become a spy. Armistead agreed, but what Cornwallis didn't know was that Armistead was secretly working for the colonial side. He passed along important information to the Continental Army and gave unimportant information to Lord Cornwallis. Peter Salem, a freed slave, was one of the militiamen who fought in the battles of Concord and Lexington. He also fought in the Battle of Bunker Hill. Salem went on to join the 5th Massachusetts Regiment and served in the Continental Army for 7 years. Few soldiers served for that length of time. He was considered to be a war hero. As a result, in 1882, a monument was erected in Framingham, Massachusetts, in his honor. James Armistead. There were also many heroines during this time in American history. George Washington's wife, Martha, played an important role in helping the Continental Army survive at Valley Forge. She helped make clothing for the soldiers and helped take care of the sick. Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, raised their children and managed their farm, but she also housed and fed Continental soldiers. Mrs. Adams was known to write letters to her husband, one of the most important delegates in the Continental Congress. In these letters, Mrs. Adams advocated for women's rights, especially with regard to educational opportunities. She also let him know that she was opposed to slavery. At the time, most people believed that fighting in the army was strictly a job for men. Some women were allowed to serve in the army, performing duties such as nursing, cooking, searching for food, and even burying the dead. But women who tried to enlist were turned away. Some women, however, disguised themselves as men, so they too could fight for their country. Deborah Sampson from Massachusetts signed up for the army using the name Robert Shirtleaf. Sampson served for a year and a half and fought in several skirmishes. In one of them, she was wounded. 2 musket balls lodged in her thigh. Sampson removed one of the balls herself, but the other was buried too deep to be removed. Fortunately, her wound healed and she survived. After the war, Deborah Sampson was recognized by John Hancock for having shown an extraordinary instance of female heroism. Abigail Adams. Another woman, Mary Draper, also fed and clothed Continental soldiers as they marched through her hometown, but she even went so far as to melt down the pewter dishes she owned so that the metal could be used to make bullets. Still other women became heroes by simply standing up for what they believed. Historians have recorded the story of Mum Bet, an enslaved woman from Massachusetts. It seems Mum Bet may have heard her patriot master reading the Massachusetts state constitution aloud. Bet thought about the words in that document, "All men are born free and equal." She figured the words meant that she herself had a right to be equal and even free. She found a lawyer who was opposed to slavery and convinced him to take her case. To the surprise of many, she won the lawsuit. In 1781, the Supreme Court of Massachusetts ruled that Mum Bet could no longer be held as a slave. She celebrated her victory by taking a new name, Elizabeth Freeman. Her case was one of many factors that helped lead to the end of slavery in Massachusetts. Elizabeth Freeman. From hero to villain, Benedict Arnold was a hero at first. Later, he became more of a villain. He was one of the top Continental Army generals at the Battle of Saratoga and was praised after the victory there. However, Arnold opposed joining forces with the French in 1778. He believed the colonists had traded one enemy for another. In 1780, Benedict Arnold made a plan to surrender the colonial fort at West Point in New York to the British. When this plan was foiled, Arnold joined the British Army. He went on to fight for the British. The cheers for Benedict Arnold the hero quickly turned to jeers for Benedict Arnold the traitor.